Hi everyone, and welcome back to the second episode of Failure Chronicles, Part 2, and the third part of our breakdown of Alain de Botton's book, The School of Life on Failure. It is your host, Saber Mashirian, here with you. So, last time we dove into Mr. de Botton's book and his philosopher's take on life's ups and downs. What failure really means, according to him, and even his thoughts on suicide, and started to talk about what happens after you have hit a rough patch but decided against throwing in the towel for good. We talk about what happened after failure and the suggestions of Mr. de Botton about the problems. Let's continue this chapter. The next topic in the book, which really makes you think, is called Living with Eternal Infamy. Here, Mr. de Botton puts a lot of the blame on the internet for this idea that our mistakes can haunt us forever. His take on it is pretty deep. He says, when search engines first came around, we were stoked to have all this information at our fingertips, anytime, anywhere, and that we had never forget anything again. Basically, we were promised that one of our biggest flaws, being forgetful, had been fixed. But people did not really think about the downside. The ability to endlessly remember everything and never forget a thing also means that if we ever screw up and get publicly shamed, that shame can follow us around forever and never truly go away. The internet has become this permanent record of everyone's slip-ups, failures, and dumb moments. With the internet, we are kind of stuck in our worst moment, the one some reporter wrote about, or some random person with a phone camera and a social media account who has not exactly studied ancient Greek ideas about empathy recorded and blasted out to the world. Mr. de Botton argues that just like society sets out punishments for every wrong deed, like jail time that has a beginning and an end, it also needs to figure out when to stop punishing us for public shaming. Basically, the difference between other punishments and being publicly disgraced is that there is no judge to say when enough is enough, no jury to look at the case again. This kind of punishment can actually be worse than being locked up, and it never really ends because the internet keeps it alive forever. Back in the day, if you got a bad rap, you could maybe start fresh with a new identity, change your name, or even move to a new place. But with the internet, you're pretty much known everywhere. The only way the author suggests dealing with this problem is to try and forget. He says humans are incredibly adaptable, and you will eventually get used to how people treat you. So just try to let it go and keep living your life. Then the author jumps into the topic of love, offering his own unique perspective with a clear goal. If you embrace and stay true to the kind of love he's talking about, it will be a real lifeline when you miss. Mr. Botton believes that what we often see as love in society, in movies, and in stories is not really the full picture. He argues that giving something to someone who deserves is not the highest form of love, or even being head over heels for someone beautiful and wanting to spend your life with them is not the truest kind of love. That's more like natural attractions, just basic instinct. The kind of love Mr. Botton is after is closer to forgiveness and selflessness. He says real love is when you give something to someone who does not necessarily deserve it, but really needs it. It is forgiving someone who is messed up, but you know deep down they are carrying some pain and could use a helping hand. For instance, if you're at the airport and you see an employee being super rude and barking orders at everyone, don't just think about how to get back at them. Instead, try to think about what might be going on in that person's life that's making them act that way, and maybe even how you could offer them some kindness or peace. His overall point is that when you can genuinely understand, forgive, and be selfless towards others, that is when you are really showing love. He says it is not a big accomplishment to love someone who is beautiful, always on their best behavior, and gliding throughout life effortlessly. What really deserves our attention and love are the people and things that are flawed, damaged, and do not like themselves. In this view, love is seeing a clear reflection of yourself in the struggles of another person. This is the kind of love that stops us from being impatient, puts an end to wars, stops the blame game, calms anger, prevents violence, and ultimately allows the civilization to keep on ticking. The big takeaway from this kind of love is that we should recognize how much we ourselves might need this kind of forgiving love someday. There might come a time when we are the ones needing mercy and forgiveness. The other then talks about forgiveness, and he kind of subtly points out a major way our mind plays tricks on us. We tend to forget our own mistakes and shortcomings. Why this can be a good thing for our mental health, saving us from getting too down on ourselves, it becomes a problem when we are quick to judge others for their mistakes, acting like we have never put a foot wrong. So the Botton brings up the story of the woman who was caught cheating and was about to be stoned. He says that because we often make things too sacred, We forget that Jesus was also a philosopher, and it taught a huge lesson in that story when he said that only the person who has never sinned should throw the first stone. He was reminding all of us just how imperfect we are. So, who are we to judge others? The author believes that our constant need to feel right gets in the way of us being forgiving and kind when it really matters. And that leads to a lot of unnecessary harshness. But if we can challenge our own thinking and always remember our own screw-ups, we can be more forgiving and make the world a slightly better place. Later on, Mr. Botton gets into some practical steps we can take after we fail. Basically, ways to fail a little bit better. Not that we should be planning our failures, but more like when we do mess up big time, what are some actual things we can do to lessen the damage? His first piece of advice might sound a bit sneaky. He suggests you could change your name. He says don't see this as some kind of underhanded trick. Sure, major criminals often do this, but we all tell little white lies in our lives, like telling someone their cooking is amazing, even if it is not. So here's the deal. You have messed up and it's out there. People who do not know you well will probably judge you based on your mistake. But by changing your name, you can kind of sidestep that initial judgment and let people get to know you without any baggage. Then, if you later decide to tell them your old name and they find out about your past mistake, they can judge you more fairly based on their actual experience with you. So, first up, consider a name change. The second practical tip is to move away. Even though the world feels super connected these days, there are still huge, busy cities out there, far away, where someone with a bit of a tarnished reputation can find a fresh start. No wonder needs to know about your past failures or mistakes. Pack your bags, head over there, and try to find a bit of peace for yourself. The next thing you can do, as we touched on earlier, is to switch up your friend group. Now that you have messed up and maybe been publicly shamed, you do not need to keep hanging around your old friends and constantly feel like you are being judged or looked down on. Find some new pals. The third suggestion is something to think about before you even fail. The author says, always try to build your life in a way that if you do stumble one day, you will at least have some comfort and peace of mind to fall back on. It is like having a safety net, specifically when you're building close relationships and falling for someone. When you're first getting to know them, really try to make sure that their love and affection for you is genuine, for who you truly are, and not because of your status, what you can do for them, or any other hidden motives. Figure out why they actually want to be with you and then really think about their character, how generous and kind they are, and how quick they are to judge or criticize others. Because when you do face a setback, one of the worst things that can happen is that the people you loved and thought loved you will either bail on you or join in on the judging and criticizing, adding to your pain. So it's worth thinking about this stuff beforehand and taking some preventative measures. Make sure that if you fail in one area of your life, you won't also have your heart broken. The next step the author suggests after failure is to change your job or workplace. He says that, unlike in the past, our job after setback is not necessarily the place to try and prove ourselves. Instead, it can be a place to kind of disappear for a bit. The author recommends looking for jobs where you're actually helping with real problems in society, like assisting people in prison, the elderly, in countries torn by conflict, or those who are sick. By taking on these kind of roles, you get involved in challenges that are much bigger than your own, leaving you less time to do on your stuff. These jobs do not remind us of what we have lost, but instead show us what we still have and give us a sense of purpose. Another idea from Mr. Botton, drawing from traditional Chinese wisdom, is to embrace a period of solitude. He explains that in the past, the Chinese had a solid understanding of how the world works, and their culture had a place for failure. They recognized that it's a natural part of being human, and even expected good people to stumble sometimes, just because that's how life goes. So, they came up with a respectful way for those who had failed to cope. Withdrawal. Chinese folks who had messed up and lost face would leave the big cities and find peace in a countryside or forests and observing nature, continuing their lives calmly and with dignity. Mr. de Botton suggests that this Chinese practice can also be really helpful for us after we have faced failure and public embarrassment. The next thing Mr. de Botton focuses on is how parents should handle things with their kids when they are going through a tough time or have messed up. He believes that while it's our job to protect our children and keep them from unnecessary stress, if we try to act like everything's perfect when we are actually struggling or have failed at something, our kids are going to pick up on our anxiety and know something's wrong. And that's when, if we do not talk to them honestly, they might start to think they are the reason for our worry and sadness, blaming themselves and growing up feeling inadequate and guilty. Also, by keeping our failures a secret, they never learn that it's normal to stumble in life. So, when they inevitably face their own first big failure, they might feel like they are the only ones who have ever messed up because they have never seen it happen before. They might see their parents as these perfect beings who never failed, making them feel even more like a screw up. The author suggests doing our kids a huge favor and being open with them when we fail. Teach them that there are things in this world beyond their control. What human nature is really like, and how society sometimes reacts. So they understand that failure is a part of life. Then, when they do stumble, they won't automatically think it's all their fault and that they are weak and miserable compared to everyone else who seems flawless. The author says, no child needs a perfect parent. They need a real one, someone who is honest, does not place blame unfairly, and knows how to say sorry when they need to. In the section that follows, titled Confession, Mr. de Botton offers some food for thought for society as a whole. He suggests we need to create an environment where people who have messed up have the chance to own up to their mistakes. He brings up Christianity, which starts with the idea that humans are inherently flawed, descendants of the original sinners, Adam and Eve, and that making mistakes is just part of being human. He then proposes we create opportunities for people to confess without immediately facing harsh judgment, humiliation, insults, or severe punishments. So they can, in a way, make amends for their wrongdoings and try to set things right. He also suggests giving people the space and encouragement to think about why they made those mistakes in the first place, considering their childhood experiences, their personality, their natural tendencies, their upbringing, and even their genes. Understanding where our mistakes come from does not excuse them, but it can help us feel less like ending it all and not be so incredibly hard on ourselves. We are not asking to get off scot-free, just to be understood. The third point in this section is the need to allow people to apologize. Mr. de Botton argues that in our current world, an apology often leads straight to punishment, like jail time. Confession followed by serious consequences. Because of this, people often do not get the chance or do not have the guts to apologize, fearing the repercussions. But if people felt safer and more comfortable apologizing, they would be much better able to take responsibility for their actions and then more effectively try to fix the harm they have caused. From the author's perspective, in today's secular world, the only way to make up for wrongdoings seems to be prison. He questions whether prison can really make up for all our mistakes, or if it actually helps beyond just keeping active and dangerous criminals separate from society, which is its main function. We need to get creative about how we repair the damage, because we need to find ways other than just locking people up, so they can try to make amends for the harm, both financial and emotional, they have inflicted on others. And finally, he emphasizes that we shouldn't block off all avenues for redemption. We should be willing to have some faith in those who confess, hoping that one day they too can trust our sincerity. We should never just punish someone without also offering them a chance to make things right. No one should be completely written off without the possibility of making amends for their mistakes. Let's moving on in the book. After Mr. Botton shared some physical ways to cope with the pain of failure, he also gives us some mental and emotional strategies to help us find a bit of peace and accept ourselves after major setbacks. The first strategy is to shift our perspective on our own little world by thinking about the vastness of the universe. We should really consider our tiny place in this enormous cosmos and understand just how small and insignificant we are in the grand scheme of things. If we look at the world from this angle, knowing that in billions of years our sun will explode and wipe out everything on Earth, it suddenly doesn't seem to matter so much who was successful and who was not. He suggests that the best philosophy class in the world happens every night when we look up at the stars, the cosmos, and the planets, and we can learn some profound lessons from it. Then he encourages us to really observe nature right there on our own planet. Take a good look at the huge deserts, the vast oceans, the towering mountains, or even active volcanoes, and remind ourselves just how weak, small, and new we are compared to the immense forces of nature. After that, let's take a look at history. By studying history, we realize that anything that was once considered incredibly valuable quickly loses its importance. And any human who was once the most powerful person of their time on a historical time scale disappears pretty quickly. Reading history helps us see that we too will thankfully be forgotten before too long. The author brings up the sad story of Oscar Wilde, the famous English writer and artist from the 19th century, who experienced a huge fall from grace with just one mistake. And the world treated him so harshly that he never really recovered. By reminding us of this, the author wants us to rethink our usual moral judgments and have more empathy for people like that. He argues us to offer love not just to those who seem to deserve it, but also to those who really need it, people who have slipped up and does not seem worthy of love, but who are actually the ones who are truly in need of understanding and forgiveness. Mr. Botton believes that a truly civilized world is one where people like Oscar Wilde can be forgiven and their mistakes can be looked past. A world where we are constantly reminded that even good people can mess up and fail, and they should not have to pay for their mistakes forever. That's it for the part 2 of episode 2 of Failure Chronicles. Thank you for watching me and hope to see you again later.